Ramanaya. Hari Om. Glad to be here yet on another occasion to reflect on this Ramana's Atma Vichara series. Today, let's take a look at one of the slokas in Bhagavat Gita and relate it to Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi's teaching in the text called Saddarshan. In Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 2, sloka 48, Lord says, Siddhya Siddhyau Samo Bhutva Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. Siddhi and Asiddhi, success and failure. Samo Bhutva, he says, be equanimous towards the success and failure. And he says, equanimity is yoga. So here, Bhagavan says, yoga is realization of the self, being united with one's own self. So Lord says, for the union with one's own self or self-realization, equanimity is the way. And what is this equanimity he's talking about? He's giving us a clue. In success and failure, Siddhya Siddhyau Samo Bhutva, be equanimous towards success and failure. So is that all? Not necessarily. What he means by be equanimous in success and failure is not only be equanimous in success and failure, he means all the pairs of opposites. Heat and cold, victory and defeat, profit and loss, joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain. You can go on listing the pairs of opposites. And he says, regard the pairs of opposites as equal. Be equanimous towards them. And he says that equanimity towards these pairs of opposites leads to yoga, union with the self. Okay, every word of it makes sense, but we need to understand and reflect a little bit deeper in order to understand how this equanimity, how regarding these pairs of opposites lead to yoga. Let's try to look at the pairs of opposites. Heat or cold, victory or defeat, profit or loss. When we are not equanimous towards them, it leads to a lot of agitations, thought agitations. As it is, we already have this notion that I am a person, I am a finite entity, identification with the body, mind, and intellect. I regard myself as a finite entity. And then I look at these pairs of opposites. And when I don't look at them equally, when I look at them differently as opposites, then depending on whether these pairs of opposites are conducive or inconducive, my thought multiplies. And the thought multiplication increases my sense of identity with the finite, my sense of identity with the body, mind, and intellect. So here, what the Lord says is that when you regard them as equal, that means only way you can look at them as equal is to, when you refuse to see the differences and distinctions between the pairs of opposites. whether it's victory or defeat, profit or loss, heat or cold, when you refuse to look at the differences, then you are unable to think of them. So usually in the world, we have this habit of classifying them as conducive, inconducive, and then, these pairs of opposites, and thinking in terms of these pairs of opposites is what we do, which leaves a lot of thoughts and identification with the finite. So when you refuse to look at the differences and distinctions, then you are unable to create any thoughts, unable to think about them. So the number of thoughts reduce. And when you are no longer thinking in terms of pairs of opposites, you are no longer continuing to extend the definitions of yourself as a finite entity. Then gradually you come out of the notion that I am a finite entity, leading to thoughtless state in which you are in a position to experience who you are. When you have no more thoughts defining you as a finite entity, then when in that thoughtless state, which is the whole purpose of meditation, in that thoughtless state, you experience who you are. That is the true self. That is what is known as yoga, the union with the self. So, this thoughtless state during which you experience who you are is made possible when you have this equanimity towards the pairs of opposites. Now, Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi, in the text called Saddarshanam, in the sloka number 11, he states the same thing. He says, when it comes to pairs of opposites, instead of focusing on those pairs of opposites, he says, ask the question, to whom these pairs of opposites are. Not to focus on the pairs of opposites, whether it's heat or cold, or victory or defeat, profit or loss, success or failure, etc. Not to dwell on that, but to whom this success is, to whom this failure is, to whom this victory is, to whom this defeat is. He says, ask that question. Because the success and failure, victory and defeat, heat and cold, they come and go. The one who witnesses this remains. So he says, instead of lending your attention to these pairs of opposites, ask the question, to whom these pairs of opposites are. Turning our attention to not what the witness, turning our attention not to the things which are being witnessed in terms of pairs of opposite, but the attention to the witness itself, that is, who I am. So basically, when he says, instead of focusing on the pairs of opposite, ask the question, to whom these pairs of opposites, he is asking us to ask the question. Forget about what I am seeing, what I am experiencing, but ask the question, who am I? Who is experiencing this? Forget about the experiences, but who am I who is experiencing this? So that question shifts our attention away from the pairs of opposites. In other words, shifts our attention away from everything which is finite, bringing the attention back to myself. And whatever the answer we may come up with, again, is finite and it wouldn't belong to any of these pairs of opposites. And again, he says, ask the same question, to whom these pairs of opposites are. Ask that question and turn your attention away from the pairs of opposites, away from the finite. So when you turn the attention away from the finite, when you turn the attention away from the pairs of opposites, that leads to a thoughtless state, during which you are no longer identifying with anything finite. You are no longer asserting yourself as anything finite. When you are no longer asserting yourself as anything finite, when you are no longer identifying with anything finite, and when your attention is with you, you come to experience who you are. So, Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi is giving us a technique of tuning to our own self by tuning out of pairs of opposites. Because that's how we witness the world. That's how we witness the pairs of opposites. That's how we identify with the finite. So he says, tune out of pairs of opposites. And when you tune out of pairs of opposites, tuning into the one who is witnessing the pairs of opposites, tuning into the self is inevitable. So in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Siddhya siddhyo savo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Regarding the pairs of opposites, success and failure, as same. Being equanimous towards the pairs of opposites leads to yoga. And same thing, Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi also validates with this sloka number 11 in Saddarshan, where he says, ask the question, to whom these pairs of opposites? Om Namo Baghavathe Shri Ramana.